All right. We are live. Yes. Sorry, everyone who was watching about that little delay, but technology, what can we do? Welcome to Virtual TrekCon and the Cage 60th anniversary celebration. I'm John Champion from Roddenberry Podcasts and the Mission Log Podcast, and we're just going to go around the room and introduce ourselves. So that's me. My part is done. I'll see you guys later. Whoever is next.
Well, I'm Larry Nemecek, Dr. Trek. Hopefully you know me from the Trek Files and Tuesdays Live and Portal 47 and Cadet Alice and Second Opinion and all the good stuff. And I've been playing around with this universe for a few decades now. And I'm so excited for today and for this awesome panel.
Yeah. And I am Subrina Wood, one member of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. I'm one of the SyFySistas. So we're here to tell you about this, my favorite episode. Well, it's Yvette's favorite episode. It's really? Yvette's favorite episode. But
okay. We'll have to get Yvette to call in. Yes. And Larry, would you like to introduce our very special guest?
We are so thrilled to have, somebody I met about in the 50th anniversary. I was so glad to meet Sandy and have her on Portal 47 and meet her at cons over the years since then. And I'm so glad she's here with us. Sandy was part of the original cast of The Cage. I want to say Talosian #3, which sounds whatever. But you were there. You were dealing with Gene and Bob Butler and the rest of the cast, and Sandy, and still working. I'm going to say,
still working. Actually, I guess I was. I don't know if I was Talosian #3 or Talosian #2, only because every time you saw Meg, it was me on her right side, walking with her all the time.
Oh, okay.
I was always with her, and then when she gets pulled out of the cage, or pulled into the cage rather, by Shatner, and I wasn't Shatner, excuse me. Oh my God.
Different show.
I'm sorry. I'm going to recheck your resume one more time.
But anyway, that was me. I doubled her doing that.
Oh, okay. You were doing stunt functions then, right?
Yes, it was.
Wow. Yeah. And you did mention Shatner, and we will get to that because you actually have the distinction of performing with two renowned Starship Enterprise captains. Of course, you were in The Cage as a Talosian, and you got to work with the late, great Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike. And then only some, months later, you find yourself back on Star Trek, and you were in, of course, what was the first regular filmed episode, and you were the salt monster, if that's correct. Yes?
What?
The salt vampire. Yes. So you got to work with Shatner as well. So just so everybody knows, you're Star Trek bona fides. Yes, excellent recreation by Dr. Trek. So we will talk about both captains, but Larry, why don't you put a little bit of context on this for us? We're talking about The Cage in the 60th anniversary terms, and people are saying, wait a minute, Star Trek is celebrating its 58th for the premiere date, September of 1966. But The Cage, give us a little bit of the timeline on when that was developed and shot.
Well, among the things I feel like I've been able to contribute to everything Star Trek is the idea that 5 years ago, when we were leading up to the big 50th, and everybody was going gaga about the 50th, in 2014, I was saying, guys, we could start the party now. Star Trek really turns 50 with The Cage, because 1964, ahead of 1966 and the premiere year on NBC, that we all mark as the birthday, that was the development of The Cage. So it's 1964 was happening, but if you look at it, I go back and I still say this. If you have just come to Star Trek, if you came to Star Trek with the very short treks was your first trek, you need at some point to go back and find a copy. It's in used bookstores. You may be able to wrangle one online, find PDFs. Get the original making of Star Trek, because even though it's about the 60s, so much of TV production has not changed. The attitudes are still there. The interrelationships of the creatives and the crew and directors and writers and actors, it's all the same, but you get the germination of Gene's idea and how it developed. Because if we're talking about The Cage, what you have to remember about The Cage is, even though it changed and there were tweaks made and it was recast and all of that, and we can, and I hope, and we're going to talk about how The Cage holds up and how it doesn't hold up, maybe. But all of that the cage is the story of the cage is the story of Star Trek. It's like that's the pilot. So in developing Star Trek, there were times when they would say, okay, now then after we'd shoot the pilot, if we sell it, but all the original creative impetus into Star Trek, into the cage, is what Star Trek is. And that's why we're going to talk today about so many things that, again, recasting, technology changes, and obviously the decades have brought us new series. But we talk about the cage, we're talking about Gene Roddenberry's original germ of an idea, and there was no other writers and showrunners and all that yet. It's still back to Gene's original baby, and you get back to for good or bad, and mostly for the good, you get back to that original germ of an idea of what Star Trek is, and the germ of the idea of why we're sitting here 60 years later talking about it.
And with that said, I want to jump up to Subrina real quick and just ask, purely distilled original version of Star Trek, as we talk about the cage, for better or for worse, what elevates this episode for you? Why is it maybe a top episode for you?
Well, just as Larry said, it is the foundation of what we're going to see going forward. I mean, all of the prime directives and everything is laid out for us here in the show. Even the idea of a captain having fatigue. I mean, we start right off with these guys are tired, they're human beings. And I don't think we really played that up in the later franchises, but in this TOS, there were a few times where they were beat. And I just love the interaction of the crew too. And they have number one. So This was a big deal in 64. You people may think that, oh, so what? But we haven't seen number one again till like 2 years later, 2 years ago. So it took them 8 years to get number one back. So this is a big, big thing. And that's why I really think that the cage is important.
We have joked here in the office many times, and I did again this morning, where we're talking about the entertainment landscape, that Star Trek The Cage up to Star Trek Strange New Worlds is the longest pilot to series pickup gap in TV history.
Ever,
right? Yeah, but look, all it took was 58 years of perseverance.
When you get technical about it, yes.
Yes, yeah.
For Pike and number one, yeah.
So, Sandy, tell us where your Star Trek journey began and how you found yourself on this little sci-fi pilot being produced by Desilu and some relatively unknown TV producer named Gene Roddenberry.
Because I didn't know they let professional stunt women work when they're 12.
Right.
Your mouth to God's ears. Actually, I was doing Lost in Space, and the original Lost in Space, and doubling Bill Mummy, who was 11 years old at the time. And what had happened was, from the beginning, I was a dancer. And so I danced with Elvis and did 15 pictures with him. And then when he stopped doing pictures, dancers were in the background. There was SEG, which was Screen Extras Guild, and Screen Actors Guild at that time. So I was in Screen Extras Guild as a dancer, and then your background players were also in that category. So what happened was, when Elvis stopped doing movies, which was change of habit, I thought, well, I'll do some background work. Why not? I'm in the union. So Central Casting sent me out to do stand-in work on Lost in Space. And they started asking me all these questions, which was, all they needed to know was how tall I was and if my coloring was correct. And the stunt coordinator, which I didn't know who he was, turned to me and said, have you ever thought about doing stunts? And I went, what's a stunt? And they explained it. And he said, look, you come to the gym 3 days a week and you can do the stunts on the show and you can double bill. And I went, cool. So into the first year I was doing the show, Roddenberry called and said, yeah, I know you guys are doing a space show. We need somebody that's small to play a Talosian that won't break out from all of this stuff we're going to stick on her face. And he said, oh, I got the perfect person. It's Sandy. And so she's not working next week, so you can have her. And literally that's how it happened.
Well,
Wow.
So we're talking about, hey, like I said, I'm all for partying whenever and however and as soon as we can. But the development of the cage, like famously, Gene put his memo together, Star Trek Is, right? That had the outline, and then he had, what, 2 or 3 dozen story ideas, of which The Next Cage was one of them. But that was March 11th, very famously. And then that year was writing it, trying to sell it, to pitch it to Desi Lewis, a studio, and then he went to CBS, and they said, no thanks, we've got lost in, then at NBC. So the whole year was the deal and the writing and all that, and then they get into production by summer and fall, because they actually shot it. And when you work, Sandy, you remember what time of the year it was, I bet.
Yeah, it was in the middle of this. I think it was midsummer. Yeah, mid or late summer, right in there.
Oh,
because we had air conditioners going on the set all the time, and they had to turn them off when we were shooting because they made too much noise.
I think they had air conditioners going just because of the hot lamps, and it was an ancient set, because they were actually shooting in the middle of December.
Was it December?
Uh-huh. The first day of shooting was November 27th, and then they've wrapped on December 18th.
You're probably right. I mean,
I'm looking at it. But what I'm saying is, if you remember the air conditioners, that was probably exactly because they had the white lights and they had motors and fans blowing and all of that.
Absolutely did.
Might have been a bit warmer when they were shooting The Man Trap. So
yes,
that could have been.
That would have been in summer.
By the way, I don't want to derail us here, so everybody hold your thoughts. But I do just want to acknowledge people in our audience who are watching live. And we can say hello. I think there was some confusion about the link, but hopefully you found us on the Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube page, or you have caught us through Virtual TrekCon. Shout out to everybody at Virtual TrekCon. Hi to Scott. Hi, Marcia. Hi, David. Hi, Richard. Hi, Joel. Hi, Kimber Spores. Angela asks, what is the book title again? It is, of course, The Making of Star Trek by Stephen Whitfield, a.k.a. Stephen Poe. And
this has gone through many editions and covers. So this is
many reprints. So it is out of print. It is an older book, but it is still relatively easy to find. So make sure you pick that up. And any other questions that pop up, I will try to jump in and rudely interrupt the conversation with your questions from time to time. But a lot of folks saying hello. So hello back to you, Rico, Robert, Kyle, Bruce, everybody. Bruce says, sup, Subrina. So, your fans are joining us here. Oh, John says that VTC has the wrong link. So sorry. Hopefully you have all found us here. So back to the conversation, everybody. Sorry about that interruption, but hello, everybody.
Yes. Hello.
All
no,
right.
I was trying to get the idea that when Sandy was working, that a lot of the development had gone into it already. And of course, though, it came down to the shoot, and the shoot's a make or break part of it. And it looks like, just looking at the schedule, they shot a lot of the ship sets first before they got to the Talos material. So it looks like maybe Pearl Harbor Day might have been, it says Talos 4 surface, although that was probably with the scientists that evaporate and walking around with the singing leaves and all of that bit. So Sadie, what did you I mean, we really look at the whole scope of the cage and what went into it, but everybody's here and they want to hear, like, what was your memory? Like, it was just one of those happenstance things. Hey, we got a job for you. Okay. Did anybody say, by the way, we're going to glue to your face? I mean, what was the reaction? How did that all play out for you? Just go here, go there, do this. Okay. And you go there and you go, oh, this isn't an Elvis movie.
No.
Why do I have a giant head?
Why do I have a giant butt head on my the pre-Ferengi butt head?
It was very interesting because I was doing Monsters anyway on Lost in Space.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Sticking prosthetics on my face and stuff anyway. So they knew I wasn't going to break out. So when Paul Stater, who was our stunt coordinator, sent me over there, he said, you're going to play a character and they're going to, put a bunch of stuff on your face, and you okay with that? And I went, yeah, I'm fine, because I was used to working costumes and doing a lot of costume work previously anyway. So it was fine. It was just, 3.5 hours of makeup.
Wow.
And putting a ball cap on my head, and then putting the veins in, because they talk telepathy.
So you had the rig up for the
Yes.
yes.
I had
With the pulsating. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically what they did is they had the veins in the head, and then they had a tube running down my arm to a air ball, and I would push the air ball to make the veins move. So it coincided with the person reading the dialogue, who was the dialogue coach sitting out behind the scene. And and then they put all the stuff on your face to make it look like you weren't a real person, that you were a Talosian.
By the way, that seems like a really difficult acting demand off of someone. Not only are we going to cover you with all this prosthetic stuff with these pulsating veins, you're acting in the scene, somebody else is saying your dialogue, and you have to squeeze a little air bladder
it's a
every
self-service
time you hear
alien.
that person talk, but you have to be in the moment and interacting with the others. That would drive any sane person mad. That sounds and it seems like you'd almost default to the habit of kind of saying the lines quietly with the just sort of
Well, you knew the lines because you studied the script. You had to know the lines in order. So because you had to know when your dialogue came up.
Right. In
your head, you're hearing him, but you're thinking them at the same time, because you have to make this
telepathically.
Yeah, you have to make it.
Yeah, it seems like the impulse would be to say them, but yes, that's wow.
Yeah.
So before we leave this, I just want to get this, but you didn't just double for Will, for Billy Mooney on you were doing Aliens and Monsters too?
Oh yes, and voiceovers. I did that show for 3 years, and I learned so much on that show. I can't even tell you. I mean, it was like better than going to school, better than going to any film school you could go to, because I not only played monsters, the voiceover lady didn't show up one day, and they came down and they knew I had acting experience. So they said, come here, we got something for you to do. So I started doing the voiceovers, and they liked me so much that I just continued to do them. I got to stunt double for Bill, and then I was also standing in when they, light the lights and set the cameras. And what was really cool about that show was they would play games with me when I was standing in, and the cameraman would go, "What lens do you think we have on? Where's your perimeters? Where's your key light? Where's this?" And so we would play guest games until I learned what lenses they were using to get, the shots. And I learned where your key light was. So it was like going to school on that show. It was incredible. You don't get that anymore.
And I just have to know, did you ever interact with the late, great Jonathan Harris?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
No. I got to tell you, I absolutely adore this man. He played the villain, and yet he was so great. I mean, my daughter would come to sit, with me, and she was like 6, I think, at the time, or something like that. And he'd sit and read books with her. I've got a picture of him reading a book with her. He was really great. And there was a time where, what 11-year-old you don't know wants to do their own stunts. And of course, Bill did. It was like, I can do that. Why can't I do that? And Jonathan, I'll never forget it. And Bill tells the story too, which is so cute, is that Jonathan came over to Bill and said, she doesn't get paid unless she does a stunt, which is true, but he went, really? And he went, really? And he went, oh, well, let her do the stunt then. Okay. So that's how we got around that.
Nice. I do want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Subrina.
I just want to go back for a second to the voiceovers, because I am sitting here with the shooting script of the Menagerie, and in it there's a little handwritten note that says the voice was done by Malachi Throne. Do you remember that, Seth?
I do know that the voices were all male voices.
And Malachi ends up playing one of the admirals in Menagerie. So
there you go. I got you. Yeah, well, it was interesting in a lot of shows. Your dialogue coach seems to have a very good opportunity to go on to be an actor, in other shows in the future. And it still
He
happens.
had that voice too. Boy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the tail end of the whole saga is that the Cage, we're sitting here talking about the Cage and we have so much more to get into, but the idea was it was just a pilot and no one saw, how many pilots were never aired because they would keep tweaking a show. I mean, half of YouTube, here's the unaired pilot of Three's Company or All in the Family or,
Right.
And that would have been the case here again because they recast the lead. Who's going to see this now? But then that whole fixed the problem of because they were behind schedule, they used this first pilot and made the Menagerie. And this was originally called the Menagerie until they took the name for the two-parter. And then they started calling it the Cage when Gene started referring to it as he did his college speaking. And when the book came, when the Making of Star Trek came out, they called it the Cage just to avoid confusion. And now we call it the Cage. But when they shot it, it was actually the Menagerie. Mm-hmm. And Commodore Mendez, Malachi Throne, was the voice of the Keeper. But then when he was cast in the two-parter, they couldn't have that voice confusion. So they go back and have Meg Wiley redub it. So, And people think they know the Cage, but when you see the Cage intact, and we didn't see it unless you saw Gene talking on his college tours, you didn't see the Cage. And it was a black and white reel because they thought they had cut the color one up. This is how much they were on budget. They cut the color one up to pull the pieces out to put into the Menagerie. So all they had were trims without a full reel.
Right.
And put it on tape that way. And then they did the blended black. I mean, I kept my tape, a copy of this. They blended back and forth to release the Cage for the first time as a big VHS tape deal. But you had black and white. And then just within a year of doing that, somebody found an intact color, edition of the entire Cage. So then they put it. But it's only been since the first 20 years of Star Trek in fandom, no one saw the Cage unless you were at Gene's speaking gigs.
Well, the one thing that I keep getting asked at, especially at conventions and stuff, is that, well, we thought all the Talosians were male because they had male voices originally, because they didn't have our voices, until later. So, that was.
I knew those were women.
Oh no, I'm.
they did this. No, they wanted that crossover of human, our expectation being played with.
But
yeah. Same thing with the Binars on Next Generation. They got small, petite ballet dancers to do
right.
Them.
Well, and the original pilot that we shot, the network refused to air it. They didn't want to air it, and they said, "No, we don't like it. This is not good." And between Lost in Space was more of a kids show. Where the Cage and all of Roddenberry's Star Treks are not kids shows. I mean, you look at them, and even as they progressed, you look at the beginning one and as the Cage and Man Trap and all of the beginning ones, they're not little kid shows. But Lost in Space really was a kids show. So it was a totally different kind of genre, but still a space show, if that makes any sense.
Although lots of little kids, there was a layer there for kids, the bright colors and the ray guns and the spaceships. And there was there to hold young kids that they would give it a second, and a lot of young fans. But it was not a kid's show, right?
Yeah. My brother and I were 10 and 8 when we were watching this.
Yeah. Wow. I think Roddenberry was brilliant. I mean, if you look back at what we had cell phones, we had iPads, we had all these things that weren't even invented at the time.
Plasma screens in every room. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was insane. I mean, whoever thought that when we were shooting those things, they would be real? I mean, the man was a genius. He really was. And it was interesting looking back at it now and going, oh my God, you know what? That was an iPad.
Right.
That was a cell phone where they flip it open and, and talk in it. It's crazy.
By the way, I want to jump into the chat here really, really quickly. And I do want to come back. Somebody mentioned to you, Larry, and of course, I'll throw this to Sandy as well, remembering the late, great Robert Butler, who directed the episode. So I do want to come back and get some comments from everybody about him. Somebody asked, though, I believe it was Mark, who said, would some of the color trims from the cage have been sold by Lincoln Enterprises? Well, I can answer that for you. They're right on the other side of that wall. Actually, they're not, because they don't exist here. Those trims were not picked up until much later, when Bijo and John Trimble were part of the scene and suggested to Gene, hey, you know what you should do is sell some of these, because they just keep hitting the floor and getting thrown away. Now, we do have trims from the menagerie. And there were copies, obviously, made from, I believe, from a positive that were then cut into the menagerie. So there are some of those around, but like all of them, there's not a lot. There are some episodes where we have none, and some episodes where we've got a fair amount of the trims, but it really just depends. As far as that original 16 millimeter that Gene went around and did the college lecture circuit, I got to see one of those in 1982, maybe 81, maybe early 82. I think one of those 16 millimeters is still here. I know that the projector is. So yeah, so who knows? But to answer that very specific question, afraid not from the cage. That would really be a holy grail kind of thing to find. So let's talk a bit about Robert Butler, though. I want to know, obviously, Larry, you had a chance to sit down and really spend some time with him and get to know him a bit. And then Sandy, I want to kick that over to you right after we hear from Larry. About your experience being on set and working with Robert.
Yeah, Robert was, first of all, I was very thrilled that he just passed in the last year, but we, especially the last few years, especially feel like we're able to get him some attention and notoriety. You know, he had it in his time and professionally, but as far as getting him to Star Trek fandom, on the order that we tried to do for Matt Jeffries and for Bob Justman and you know, those folks, because the funny thing is Robert Butler, or Bob Butler, directed The Cage, the first pilot, never directed any other Star Trek after that. But that was kind of, after he got established, that was kind of his thing. He loved directing pilots. He won 2 Emmys directing, one for The Blue Knight, which was William Holden's, it was a cop show, but it was motion picture star William Holden's journey to television. So it was going to be a high class. But this man, he directed the pilot for, and you think about what a pilot is. It set the tone, right? And even if he never directed again, he may have a hand in casting. He's going to set the tone. He's going to work with the cinematographer, the DP, to get the tone and the look. And if it's an iconic show and not just another show you're cranking out, he directed the pilots for, let me think, Moonlighting, for a little thing called Hill Street Blues, which was the explosion into an ensemble show that Next Generation took advantage of later. He directed the pilot, and there's more, but he directed the pilot of Batman. Need I say more?
Wow.
And he directed the pilot of The Cage. And he had directed a couple of episodes on The Lieutenant for Gene. So he knew him that way. And The Cage was one of the first ones where he really started to become a specialist he became known as a pilot's director. And he very rarely went back and they wanted him to direct Where No Man's Gone Before. They wanted to come back and do it. He was really, nope, been there, done that. I'm moving on. And he did a couple of features. I'm blanking on them now. I don't have the IMDb, but he's there. He won 2 Emmys, but not for some of those highlight wins that I mentioned aside from The Blue Knight. And he was very much up and going. And the very first anniversary of Portal 47, when we have our open house and invite the whole world to come in and sample the portal, he was, and it was 2016. So I had him as our first open house guest. So we have that recording for an hour or so. And then, yes, in 2019, good thing we didn't know the pandemic was a year away, but in 2019, I think for the 55th anniversary, I can't believe it's been 5 years, the 55th anniversary of The Cage, I pitched, if his son helped him get down to San Diego, he lives still here in LA, and we came down and did a live, what wound up being a standing room only, 300 people in the room, 100 people got turned away at the door down at San Diego Comic-Con live that we've got on video. And I know we've released the audio as a special Trek Files
Wow.
episode. But anyway, through all of that, very humble guy, but he had his convictions. He had his guiding creativity. And he said, yes, he had no interest in going back. And he also talked about, and what we hopefully can still get to, there's all the stresses of launching a show, right? That the pilot is the nexus of that. And there might be another pilot, which there was with Star Trek. It was more about the details than the core elements there. But he talked about that, and even things like Gene having his mistress Majel playing a lead, in which we know was really the reason she was recast and the character went away. It wasn't because of NBC was happy with a woman. We can get into this, but that was a thing for the network. But there are, and then money and who the casting is and working with actors and coming into it kind of late. Through all of that, Bob Butler had said that he just tried to, his thing was honesty and clarity and telling the story. All the suits, everybody else, it was him and the actors and the crew people that he had to deal with. And he was just focused on, he didn't care what the studio politics was, what the people politics was, unless it just, he had to deal with it. And he said he didn't. And he said he a couple of things he said. One time he got to it so late, he did help. He was there, not for the casting of Jeff Hunter or Leonard Nimoy or Susan Oliver. He loved working with all of them. He did have a hand in casting Peter Duryea, who was Dan Duryea's son, as Jose. It's interesting. Jose Tyler was the character name. The navigator was originally supposed to be Jose Ortegas. If you read that Bible that you've got, I don't know if your copy has it. So, Melissa's character on Strange New Worlds is kind of a throwback to having an Ortegas on the Enterprise after all. So there's that little bit. But he didn't have a lot to do with casting. That was one. He really got in there and was just made the trains run on time and then got as creative as he could. And he had little opinions. He said he was more experienced as a director than Gene was as a writer producer. So he would win some of their arguments or some of their creative debates. He said the one that he lost, one that he remembers now, was he didn't think the title was good. He said he thought Star Trek sounded depressing and dreary and trudging along. And he said you should call it Star Trek, like when you see the stars tracking across the view screen and stars. And he said, well, obviously, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about with that one. He said, like, time has proven Gene right. And and it was a room full of 300 people. And he says, and you all are here testament to that. So no, he was very down to earth and focused. And you can tell that. And it's only been the last 10 years or so that that the fame of Star Trek kind of caught up to him. And he even stopped to realize, oh, I had a hand. Like, he would do interviews. He wasn't a recluse, but it really didn't hit him until he realized that of all the projects he made, maybe, even Hill Street and all, and his Emmy wins, that it's going to be Batman and Star Trek that he's most remembered for by the most people, and between the two, Star Trek. And the fact that we were sitting here, on these, live shows, and he was kind of blown. Look at these people showed up just for a director, a TV director. No, he was an awesome guy and very down to earth and humble, and was conscious about all the noise happening. But he said his focus was just to get the thing done.
Nice. So I am going to kick it over to Sandy and just ask about your impressions of Robert and working with him.
Well, I loved him. Let's put it that way. He was, it's very interesting because, well, first of all, when you do pilots, when you're a director and you do pilots, you do have a lot in, to say, and you have a lot of part of the creativity of what's going in there. And he was so good at it that as time went on, the networks wanted him to do the pilots. So he kind of fell into that rather than going back, and doing shows, which we have directors today that do the same thing, that they just do pilots. And it's really, really cool because they do have a lot to say, and a lot more to say today than they used to. But I loved working with him. I mean, I got to work with him on other shows besides Star Trek. I actually did Blue Night, and which was, it's funny you mentioned names of shows that I go, oh, wait a minute, I did that show. because I go in and out so much. I go in and I work a few days and then I'm gone. And also the other thing that you said, he came in and he said, all these people, I didn't even think about Star Trek as being, I'd be remembered for. Well, neither did I. The interesting part is that I went in and I worked, a week or two on the show, and then I came back and I did I did Man Trap, and and went back, and then I started doing other shows and totally forgot about doing, Star Trek and Lost in Space. It was part of my beginnings, and I'm trying to think the gentleman's name, Richard Arnold. Mm-hmm. Richard Arnold, who was Gene Roddenberry's assistant, when they were getting ready to do the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, called me and said, he actually he emailed me and said, I want you to sign some baseball cards for Star Trek. And I went, who is this crazy person? What? And so I had him talk to my agent. I said, well, talk to my agent about this. And I called her and I said, well, you got to handle this. I don't know who this is. So she took care of everything. And she said, okay, sign the autographs. He'll pay you, half up front and half later. And I said, okay, fine. So as I was signing the autographs, we got to talking and I got to know who he was. And I did some research on him. And he said, do you want to do the 50th and the anniversary in Las Vegas? And I went, to do what? And he said, no, sign pictures, sign autographs. People will go crazy. You did the cage. And I went, sure, okay.
Yeah.
Now I was blown away. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been to the Star Trek conventions, and the one in Vegas for the 50th anniversary, I had never done one before. And I mean, I had people coming up to me, guys, and going, oh my God, when you did this character, you scared me. Oh my God, when you did this. It's like, really? And then I started to realize how enormous Star Trek is. But I had no idea. And like you said, with Butler, he was the same thing. I don't think he had an idea either, because you go in, you do your show, and then you go out and you do another one.
Well, and directors are even more, they're not caring about their face and being out in public at all. Yeah.
No, they're working, but the nice thing about him, about Robert, was that I did get to go do Blue Night with him, and I did get to do some other shows with him, and we always got along great. And I always thought he was really down to earth, good guy.
You were on the pilot for Blue Night that he directed?
Yeah.
Did he remember you, or was he the reason you were working, or what?
Yeah, he was the reason I was working.
Oh, see, small town, long memories.
Very small town in those days, which was really nice.
I did some real quick math. Bob Butler was 30. He had just turned 37 when he directed The Cage, which I had never stopped to think about that before. So there you go.
I was 25, something like that.
Wow, Sandy, I'm just gonna hand it up for you to still be working. Wow, that's amazing. I just dawned on me that he was 37, so he was still getting his. He couldn't just hand out his calling card and say, "I only do pilots." He was in the mode of getting there, and this was one of the things he could, feather in his cap. He could point to. He did Batman, I guess, a couple years later. Adam West Batman.
Yes, I'm trying to think. I think I did Batman too. I know I did I'm just trying to remember which one I did, because I remember we were in a big dance hall party and all what breaks loose. I think that was the original Batman.
God. I'm curious, Sandy, when you worked on The Cage and then fast forward nearly 2 years to working on The Man Trap. Were you aware at the time? Like, did it seem odd to you? Wait, I did this show that never aired, never premiered, nothing ever came of it, but now I'm getting called to go back on that show. Did that register with you, or were you just not paying attention to the industry from
I
that angle.
Yeah, I wasn't paying much attention in those days. You know, you've got to understand, I was just trying to get my career started and going also. And so I was more focused on what I was doing at the time rather than trying to remember, oh, wait a minute, that pilot didn't sell. I just told, they called and said, do you want to come back and do this? We want you to come back and do this monster for us. And I went, okay. So no, I didn't think much about it. I did realize, though, when we went back, there was a different captain. That's where Shatner came in. And mainly because the casting changed because he wasn't available to come in and start and do another show. He was busy. Mm-hmm. So they recast him and they cast Shatner, and look what happened. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew what was going to happen.
Well, that's a whole question too. There's one of those debating things that everyone loves to love. The bar talk debates is if Jeffrey Hunter, or more likely his wife, hadn't demanded that he become a movie actor or return to movie acting and not take the role, and they recast it and wind up with Shatner. If Jeff Hunter had stayed as Pike at the time, no matter what, had they kept Majel or not and recast whatever. But if Pike had been the lead, if Jeff Hunter had been the lead, would Star Trek have made it?
I think so. I really do. I think a lot had to do with, well, when the money was put up, to redo it. Mm-hmm. And the network said, okay, well, you're not having a woman as the captain or co-captain, whichever she was. And so then they had to start recasting stuff. But the diversity had a lot to do with it. I mean, that was the one thing that Gene Roddenberry wanted, was all the nations supposedly, could get along, sort of. But on his ship, there was going to be a lot of diversity so that people got along. And I think that had a lot to do with the success of the show. Truthfully, I think it would have gone even if Shatner hadn't been the captain. I think as time went on, he became very much who he, the captain, and made that part more him, if that makes any sense. Mm. It became more of who he was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would have been fine. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't know if one person had a lot to do with it in the beginning, but as you start to play a role, it becomes more of you, and so what happened with Shatner, the more he played it, he was more relaxed in that role and he became the captain.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, let me throw this out real fast. I think looking at it, there's a couple things. One, The Cage was conceived in 1964. Gene did it right after he'd done a show about a Marines at a Marine base. And he did it partly, I don't think he really hit the nail on the head so much about, we're going to have themes and issues and social justice and poverty and war and, and the nuke war and all. He didn't hit that over the head if you look at the documents.
Right.
And the cast and the crew, and again, the navigator was supposed to be Jose Ortegas, wound up being cast as Jose Tyler. And I did one of my Q&A things in the column and for the magazine years ago. I realized there had been all these Latino characters in pilot lineups. Like Dr. Bashir was supposed to be Julian Amoros.
Oh.
And then they loved Sid so much that they just made it Arabic instead of Latino. And it's like so there was supposed to be Ortegas in the original series. And who am I thinking about? It was supposed to be Macha Hernandez was going to be, until they went with a, Ukrainian. So by Russian. So it's like those things happen. But even with that aside, the Cage cast is pretty white. Even to the point where 1 year later, you didn't have Nichelle yet, but you had Lloyd Haynes playing Alden. You had a little bit more diversity and a little more female representation. But the one thing that the pilots had the women in pants. not the mini. So, I mean, there's things like that going on, but the big picture is look what's happening in the States. In 64, Kennedy had been assassinated, but things were still pretty straight-laced, and TVs were black and white pretty much. And just between 65 and by the time Star Trek comes on, Vietnam's becoming an issue, and the whole thing of the square-jawed military like Gene had done
Right.
for drama on the Lieutenant, that was in the middle of changing, and it was a future Starfleet. But what was underpinning it was the ground was changing beneath their feet, right? And so by the time of the third season, you got the space hippies. I mean, and you have the Vietnam show with Private Little War. So anyway, it's like that was a time when a lot of social and political currents were shifting just from the beginning of Gene writing his memo in 64 to the end of the series.
I think the problem was in 64 was women as a whole did not have any kind of foothold. And the networks were like, well, you can't put a woman in there. She can't be one of the, stars. That you can't do that. So Gene married her.
Yeah. I wonder if we can hear from our resident sci-fi sister with a comment about that.
I was throwing a lot of that at you, Subrina, to see how you reacted.
I can imagine.
I think another thing that everybody, that was the year after the March on Washington. This is when we were saying, like, I am a man. And here we go. And, my brother was one of those people that went to Vietnam. I mean, so many Black kids had their brothers going to Vietnam, but you couldn't get, you couldn't get this, you couldn't go there, you couldn't go here. But so when Star Trek came out with this, I think it was definitely reflecting, this is what we want the world to be, even with Lloyd Haynes coming in, Dr. Mabinga coming in, Uhura in there, the Salt Creature, that episode, Uhura really, it has, the Salt Creature turns into an African man. I was like,
yes.
Okay, this is my show. I am loving this show. So it was something completely different. And yes, women were not appreciated. I'm sitting here with the script again, and I'm going to read to you the description that they give of number one in this original script.
Yes.
It says that she was slim and dark in a Nile Valley way. What in the world? And then it says, age uncertain, one of those women who will always look the same between the ages of 20 and 50. But Nile Valley way? Dean was trying. He didn't know whether it was going to be Nichelle or, as you so quaintly put it, Larry, his mistress. His mistress? Did you really say that? Okay.
Hey, the record is well known.
I know, but I just thought that was funny.
So that's the script description. So here's the writer's or the pitch document, right? The format where it's still Pike and number one. And he starts off with exactly what you read, almost mysteriously female, slim and dark in a Nile Valley way, age uncertain, but somewhere she looks the same between 20 and 50. Then an extraordinarily efficient officer, number one, enjoys playing it expressionless, cool, is probably Robert April's superior in detailed knowledge of the multiple equipment systems, departments, and crew members aboard the vessel. When Captain April leaves the craft, number one moves up to acting commander. So there you go.
Yeah, number one.
Very interesting. Sandy, I want to ask you a little bit. I love sort of like day in the life on a set series. And I realize what we're talking about is 60 years ago. So I'm not going to ask you specifics like how is the catering, although I'd be fascinated to know if you had an answer for me. But
whiz out the wazoo.
Exactly. Yeah. A nice 1964 craft services table. We could do a whole show on that. But I am very curious for you, having been, bookending your time on Star Trek a couple of years apart. Can you put into words kind of how that set operated? How levels of professionalism? Did it feel like when you were on the cage, they were just trying to figure it out, and by the time you got there for the man trap, they had figured it out? Were they still finding their way? How would you sort of typify what it felt like in those days to be on Star Trek?
Well, from what I remember, between the two shows that I did, it was totally different. Because when we did the cage, it was on set. The entire show that we did was on set. They had just like Lost in Space, they had phony rocks built, they had sand put on the stage. It was, everything, the outside stuff was on stage. So you never went outside. When we did the other show, we did Man Trap, and when they had the gore and and all of that, they actually went to Vasquez Rocks. They went outside to shoot. So they were it was a lot more organized, I think, by the time we got there. And they were allowed, they maybe had a better budget, which is possible, so that they were able to go places and do more, rather than just stay on the stage. But one thing I do remember totally about about the cage was Gene Roddenberry never left the set. He never ever left the set, which was so different for me, because working on Lost in Space, Irwin Allen was really never on the set unless he would come in. We had a director by the name of Harry Harris and Sobey Martin, who would direct a lot of the shows. And if Gene
Irwin,
I'm sorry, Irwin Allen would come on the set, he would kind of take over. He would go sit, start talking, wanting to direct, and Sobey Martin would say, we'll sit in his director's chair and just let him do it. But with Gene, he was on the set, but he let Bob Butler direct, where the other way on the other set he didn't. He would take over. So I noticed that, but on the cage, everybody got along. I mean, it was, everybody talked to everybody. Nobody, felt that one person was better than the other person. I never got that feeling ever, because I kind of went in, to walk around and not talk, but was treated the same as everybody else. Everybody talked to everybody. It was, it was really nice. But it did take a long time to shoot, the first one. And the second one that I did, of course, took a long time because that costume was really hard to work in.
Oh, I bet.
Really hard to work in.
Yeah.
What were your interactions with Gene Roddenberry like, if he was there all the time?
He talked to everybody. I remember him talking to everybody, and that was the one nice thing, is that when I actually started doing conventions and got to learn remember more about what had happened, because so much of it I've forgotten. I really, you went in, I worked and went home, and never thought about it again.
Right.
But
just one out of 1,000 jobs.
It was out of 1,000 jobs. And, like I said, I was just trying to get my feet wet and never make a mistake. I didn't ever want to be remembered for, making a mistake. The one thing I did learn, and because I had 2 or 3 stunt guys that were mentors, that really helped me along the way. And the one thing they said to me is, don't ever be afraid to say no. Because if you don't, you can get yourself hurt really bad. And I learned that, where the kids today have a bad habit of saying, yes, they can do something, and not really knowing how to do it. And we've lost a few because of that. And, it's a shame, because you got older stunt people around now that know, they have so much knowledge, and the kids don't want to ask about it. They think they know it all. And instead of trying to pick somebody's brain, whether you go that way or not, but at least you learn something. And that was one thing I was always taught. I always leaned to the older guys and asked questions and learned how to rig and learned how to, say no.
Well, that's true in any field, I think. But you're right. You're right. People sometimes have to have a little seasoning before they realize what they can learn. That's
Yeah,
probably
absolutely.
true in all the fields.
You don't want to walk in there and feel like a dummy and, say, I can't do that, except that there's ways of saying I can't do it. Do you mind if we do it this way? Would it bother you if we changed this just a little bit? And you'll find actors doing that with their dialogue all the time. They're more comfortable saying it a certain way. And if it still makes sense, they'll, your directors and producers will go, okay, that's okay. And your writers, they'll understand that too. Because what's written on the page doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come out sounding like you're really talking.
Do you watch much of your work, or do you kind of separate those things? Because what I'm getting at is I'm curious if you watched The Man Trap when it premiered and thought, what have I gotten myself into? Or this is really cool.
It's interesting. A lot of people don't like to watch their stuff. And I'm sure you've heard that too.
Oh, yeah.
For some reason, I can separate me from what I'm playing. And I've always been able to do that. I can watch the character and don't think about it as me. I think about it as the character, and either like that character or I don't like that character. Or think, I do think, well, oh my God, maybe I should have done this instead. But we all do that.
Right.
But I don't try to let it influence me. There are a lot of directors and producers will not let their actors go to dailies where they show the day's work from before, because they don't want the actor sitting there going, oh, no, you can't use that. You got to reshoot it, and that used to happen. So now a lot of times they don't let the actors go in and watch the show, watch the dailies before anything's put together, because they're watching them to see if there's any technical mistakes, or if you see the boom, the microphone or something in there that they have to reshoot. So it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know, for some reason I can watch and think, okay, that was pretty good. It does sound like, the character's supposed to be, or totally going in a different direction. I doubled Cloris Leachman a lot while she was alive.
Oh, nice.
And Cloris has a way about her that's totally her. And when I did Raising Hope with her, I would watch her and I'd see how she walked and how her mannerisms were. And when I was dressed up as her, I'd have a director, if I was walking away from the director, running after me, yelling, Cloris, Cloris. And I turn around and he'd go, oh my God, I'm sorry. Because I had her down to a T. But that's what you have to do when you're stunt doubling somebody. You have to be that person. You can't be you. And it's like a big acting job.
And that's why one of the reasons why the stuntmen, the whole stunt people, that craft is, I think, getting more and more attention. And now they're talking about, I know they have their own awards, but talking about getting that on the main, like the Emmys and the Oscars, and having that, because the people who are really conscientious about, and who are, everybody's professional, but the ones who take it to the level that you're doing, where you fool the director, that deserves to be. And you're putting your life, at the bottom line, you're putting your life on the line even more so than anybody else on the crew.
Yeah, I absolutely say, depending on the show you're doing, but so many times you definitely are. And we are in the Academy, the Television Academy, and we do get Emmys, but we are not in the Feature Academy, to get an Oscar. And for some reason, they just, I don't know. They just added the casting director for an Oscar, but they won't add a stunt person, or a stunt coordinator who runs all the shows and literally hires the stunt people. So yes, the stunt people are doing their job, except the stunt coordinator is the one that's responsible for who he puts into those positions. He's not hiring them, but he is responsible if they screw up. So I don't know.
So Did they also design the stunts, the stunt coordinator?
To a great effect, yes.
Yeah,
They sit down with
okay.
the director and figure out, how something should be done and and get it done. So
Some of
it's
these,
great.
They're basically choreographing the stunt like a dance choreographer.
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, I know where to place the cameras, so it looks like you're getting hit by the car, and you're not. But we do plate shots where you'll have the bus go through, and then you'll have the person run across the street, and then you'll have it put together, and it looks like the bus just took them out. But in the old days, you didn't do it that way. You did a near miss with the bus. So things have come a long way.
You did an Edith Keeler. Yeah.
Oh, too soon, Larry.
Oh no, what? You had this come on. On a stage. You had the truck do it on a stage.
But that's really interesting. I mean, Sandy, you've been in the business for a while, and I'm sure that you've seen stunt work evolve quite a bit from people just taking near misses to something a bit more coordinated and calculated to really enhance the safety of something. I mean, talk to us about that just in your time in the business.
Well, God, there's so many ways of going. I mean, when we first started, you did high falls. You went through. When I first started, you went into boxes, and then it evolved to having an airbag, and we had specialists. I mean, I've gone 55 feet into an airbag, but we have guys that
like an Olympic event.
Yeah, Dar Robinson used to go, 100 and something, 150, 200 feet, so they were specialists in doing that. But now they put you on a wire. You still do, the lower high falls, but the big ones, you're on a wire and they can stop you inches from the ground. So, they're a lot safer when you're on a wire than, and as long as your riggers are good.
Right.
But,
that's critical. Yeah.
There's things that I've learned along the way, like, and just using high falls as an example. If you're going to do a high fall, you're going to go out your body length plus one more. It's just the rule of thumb. That's when you go off of the building, you go out your body length plus one more. So you put your airbag out where you're going to land. Okay. Well, between the building and the airbag, there's the ground. And I had this horrible feeling of not being able to push off far enough to get out to my airbag. I don't know why I had that feeling. I've had it since I started doing stunts. So I learned to fill that space up with boxes. So you take 12 by 12 boxes and you just fill the space up. And I've had directors argue with me about it. And I go, it's what I want. So I get it.
My body, my choice.
And I was doubling a girl coming out of third story window out of a school. She's supposed to be in a room where they're doing experiments and stuff. And she's got a beaker in her hand and she goes, I can fly. And she's on drugs and she goes to the window and jumps out the window. So I'm doing this jumping out the window, third story brick building, schoolhouse with ledges sticking out of every floor. Well, they put a Venetian blind on the window before I went out, and they're yelling at me, don't touch it. It's going to come right off. It's on with double-faced tape. So I listened, and so did my stunt coordinator, who was a top stunt coordinator. Because we went over to try to see if it would just come off. And everybody was panicking. Well, I hit the window, broke the glass, and got wrapped in a cocoon of the Venetian blind.
Oh, no.
It did not let go. It sucked me back against the wall of the building.
Oh.
And you talk about time stopping. It was like I was hanging out the window going, oh no. And I remember turning and grabbing my head so my head wouldn't hit the wall, and went into the airbag. And I went into my boxes, actually. I went into my boxes because I didn't get out far enough for my airbag, like this, in that position where your knees and your elbows are crunched. And my elbow broke my 2 ribs. But I didn't, I was fine. And everybody's yelling, "Oh my God, you okay?" And I'm going, thumbs up, of course. And I went back up and did it again because they wanted to know if I could. And I said to my stunt coordinator, I said, "Just walk me up and let's do it now before I start feeling any pain." And we walked up.
You're on the adrenaline.
Yeah, the adrenaline's rushing. And so, I mean, he took that Venetian blind and threw it across the floor. I will never forget that. And
There's a better Venetian blind.
Yeah, they put a new sugar glass window in, and I went out and did it perfectly, and they used the first one. Because the first one was crazy. I mean, it looked like I was out of control, and I was.
We'll never forget, guys. How do you make a Venetian blind like that? All right. So we do have a question in the chat. Yeah, I did low hanging fruit.
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to see what movie this was. I gotta think.
Changed a lot. Yes.
Someone in our chat asks, how many times did you sustain injuries?
I've been very blessed. I've broken my ribs a few times, but major injuries I have not had. The guys were getting worse injuries than the women in those days. You got to understand, when I first started, the men were doubling women. And so any major kind of stunts, the guys would be doing them. And that did change. That, changed where they had to ask 3 qualified women to do the gag. And if they all refused, then they could hire a guy. But they had to be qualified women. And so that stopped. We have some women today that are amazing stunt women. But we did then also, I mean, Jeannie Epper doubled Wonder Woman. She was just, I mean, you can look her name up and she was just incredible. But we started doing more and more, harder stunts. And, but for some reason, I don't know what it is. The guys seem to get hurt more than the women did. But like I said, I mean, as I got older, you do see where it's played a toll on your body. I'm a 4th degree black belt, and between the karate and the stunt work, I've now had 2 knee replacements and a hip replacement. But with today's age, they can fix you with, you can be bionic woman and you're fine.
I was going to say, lots of people have had 2 knee replacements and a hip replacement, and they weren't stunt people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're, by the way, I mean, you're still working. Yeah. Just tell us about some of the stuff that you've done most recently.
I love what I do. And as long as my body seems to be okay, I work out 4 days a week as it is, and so that I can stay in good shape. Last year I did CSI Vegas, and what was so cool about it, I got to do the stunts and I got hired as the actress because they thought, what, I can play the part and I can do the acting job, and
good, yay.
It saves them money and it's easier for me. I can play the whole thing. I can do the dialogue and everything else. And that's been happening a lot more lately. I've been able to play the part and do the stunts rather than going and doubling, which I've done. Thelma, which is the new June Squibbs, I believe her name is, played the lead with Richard Roundtree. It was just in Sundance and won awards and stuff. I get to play Mary, who's the driver. So I do all the driving in the show. I drive them around all over the place and, take them to all the spots that they have to go and screech into stops.
So you have your SAG card? Are you a guild member?
Yeah, all your stunt people are now SAG.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you walk the lines last year?
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Okay, folks, cred. There we go. It's you've made that. Okay.
Yeah,
One more question.
and God willing, we won't have another strike, the end of this year.
Oh, no.
With IATSE, is they're talking about,
Yeah.
all the other unions, going on strike.
Mm.
I mean, it's going to be horrible if they do, because I think people are really people barely made it through this one, and I just don't want to see people losing their houses and stuff like that. It can get there, because we haven't recovered from this yet.
Mm-hmm.
Have not recovered from this strike. A lot of people have not gone back to work yet because the new shows are kind of afraid to start up. There's shows like The Rookie and 911 and, those that were shooting before that were easy for them to start back up and go back to work. But some of the new shows haven't started yet, and we're hoping they'll start by March, but who knows?
And Subrina, you were about to say something. Your mic
Yes.
just kind of barely picked up.
You were talking about driving, and I just wanted to know, can you also stunt drive?
That's what I do. Yeah.
That they were all driving stunts. Oh my
I
God.
was doing the straight driving for them and stunt driving for them also.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
So you're double dipping. Yay.
Well, I can do you really, when I was brought up in the business, you couldn't be specialized. You couldn't just say, okay, I'm a fight guy, or I'm a high fall guy, or I'm, a driver. You had to be able to do it all.
Oh, okay.
In this day and age, it's a little different. You can be a driver and not do anything else. I mean, you're not going to work as much, of course, but you can do the fights and not do anything else. But the person that's versatile and can do more will work more. The only thing I do not do and stay away from is motorcycles. I don't like them. I'm not very tall, and I have a bad habit. It's not a bad habit; it's just a habit. If you give me a bike that's a 380 or a big bike, I can't reach the ground. So, and you don't know really what you're going to get when you go on a show. They'll say, "Oh no, we'll get you a small bike." Well, you walk in there and it's not a small bike, So, and then you don't have a lot of protection. You can wear your pads and you can wear your helmet, but you've got much more protection in a car. You've got roll cages, you've got, all your pads on and everything else, but in a bike, you just don't have that much protection. And we've got 2 or 3 girls that are incredible on bikes, and let them do the job.
Give them the job. Yeah.
Give them the job. I don't need it.
Well, hey, we have come up toward the end of our time here. And by the way, thank you again to everybody who's been in the chat with us live. It's fantastic. There was a whole other conversation happening about the Dick Van Dyke Show. So maybe we'll have to do just like a separate panel about that in next year's VTC. But anyway, everybody is just so interested and grateful for your story, Sandy. One asked earlier, and I'm sorry that I don't have the name, what was the movie where you had the stunt out the window that you were describing?
The Venetian Blind
earlier?
stunt.
Yeah.
It was a TV show. I was doubling Holly Hunter. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Holly Hunter was the girl who was high and jumping.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the girl I was doubling. I can't remember the name of it.
Well, hey, folks, you can figure that out. Yeah, you can figure that out on IMDb.
We have IMDb.
Holly Hunter, and then in the same project with our very own Sandra Gimpel. So thank you all so much. I'm going to go around very quickly and ask everybody to say where they can be found online, if you wish to be found online. If you don't, you can say, hey, this is it. I'm out of here. So Larry, go ahead.
LarryNemecek.com, Larry Nemecek's Trekland on YouTube, especially. Please like and subscribe. All the socials are there. One real quick thing we didn't mention: from day one on the cage, Gene was using Harvey P. Lind at the Rand Corporation, and that was the beginning of Star Trek science DNA as logical projection. So I wanted to throw that in real quick too.
Nice. All right.
Anyway, but this has been an awesome panel.
Our very own sci-fi sister, Subrina Wood.
Yes, you can reach us at SyFySistas.com. It's SyFySistas.com. We're also on TikTok, Instagram, and X.
Formerly known as the platform formerly known as Twitter. Yes.
Twitter.
And by the and
All the
your
Sci-Fi
very next
Sisters.
panel is SyFySistas, right?
Yes, it is.
All
We're
right.
Sci-Fi
So
Sisters sending
excellent.
out an SOS.
Excellent. So everybody go follow that. And Fran,
minutes.
Yvette, everybody's going to be there.
I got 3 minutes to change. Okay.
All right, in mere minutes. So make sure you follow SyFySistas and stick with Virtual TrekCon to catch that panel and everything else coming up. I'm John from Roddenberry Entertainment. We've got a lot more participation in Virtual TrekCon as well. Charlene Schmidt will be on talking with Prodigy star and friend of the show, Bonnie Gordon. That is in a couple of days. Our very own Captain Mike and Jessica Lynn Verdi. Saturday morning, we'll be talking with the great Doug Drexler about the Orville. So do not miss that. I'll be back on Sunday night with the post Lappy Awards show with Larry and with Charlene and with, let's see, Ben from Greatest Generation and John from Screen Rant and
Charlene Schmidt. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, and Anne-Marie, I think, is part of that
Anne-Marie.
as well. Yeah. Yeah. So sorry if I left anybody out, but that will be awesome. And then our very own special guest, Sandra Gimpel, what you got for us? Where can people find you and follow you? It looks like you had a last thought there.
I have a website that you can see my stunt reel runnings across the top and pictures from a lot of shows and stuff like that. And it's just called Sandra Gimpel, Gimpel.com. And I have a book out that I just came out last year, and you can either find it on my website or you can go to Amazon, and it's just put in Stunt Lady and you'll find it. And but if you want it autographed, you have to go to my website to get that done. But it's the history from Lost in Space to CSI Vegas. I mean,
or catch you at a con.
Behind the Suns, all this stuff. Yeah.
And why would anybody not want the autographed version? So they need to go to sandragimpel.com and get the book there, get it autographed, and then also come find you at a convention.
And Saturday, I'm doing the Godfrey
Gallifrey.
Oh,
You're at Gallifrey 1. Okay, in LA.
Yeah.
Live.
At the Marriott Hotel.
Well, I'll see you.
Oh, cool. In by the airport.
Yeah.
At
LAX
Excellent.
Marriott Live.
I will
John,
have
real quick, Dr. Trek, Dr. Ali, it's a life support live reunion. I
Ooh,
totally forgot
right.
to mention here at Virtual TrekCon tomorrow at 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern.
perfect.
Oh, cool. All
A
right.
life support live reunion show special.
Everybody, thank you so much. Thank you to the Virtual TrekCon crew for bringing us in, let us be a part of this. SyFySistas, Sabrina, go do your thing. Everybody jump over there and catch that panel because the sisters are great. And check out the rest of the schedule at virtualtrekcon.com. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us here
Yes.
today.
You guys, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Excellent. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Cheers. Take care. Thank you for joining us. And
Trek well, everybody.
we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.